No snow. No. Why does it do that? I don't know why it does that. I must not click a button correctly. Okay, let me start over. I'm so sorry, guys. No sound on the YouTubes. On the YouTubes. I don't know why that happens. Smash that like button, share this out with your friends, subscribe to the channel. I hope you are staying warm this morning. Very, very cold. There was like 5 to 6 inches in central Illinois. And the further south you went, it looks like there was even more snow in Illinois, like 12 inches, southern Illinois, which is odd. And down south, where I'm at, there was a big old ice storm, and it was really fascinating. This was like my first ice storm here in South Carolina, and apparently South Carolina doesn't get ice storms very often. I think the last one for this area where I'm at was like 20 years ago, and you couldn't go anywhere because there's no salt trucks anywhere, snow plows, nothing like that really. I mean, they do have them, but not to nearly to the extent Illinois has them. The power lines, come down. I don't think they're built as strong here in the South as they are in Illinois. It's just different weatherization happens in Illinois. So that's fascinating. It was kind of like I don't know what you call it, a culture shock. I was like, well, you can't go anywhere because am I still on mute? Can you guys hear me? I hope you guys can hear me now. It says that I have sound, so hopefully I have sound, which is fascinating to me that like they don't have the same piping here in South Carolina as they do in Illinois. So the pipes freeze. You gotta, kind of let it run a little bit. The pipes, the water run a little bit so the pipes don't freeze. So yeah, that was fascinating to experience this week. And I don't know where you're at. If you were affected by the storm, I hope you're staying warm. We have so much to get to this morning. I hope that you are able to hear me. Let me know in the comment section if you can hear me now. It says that I've got audio, but hopefully that is true. Let me know in the comment section. Okay. So much to get to. I do want to get to this church ambush is so much worse than what we thought. So the video was pretty bad. Don Lemon and this ambush of anti-ICE protesters went into this Minnesota church. But it's so much worse than I had thought. Somebody actually broke their arm. So we're going to get to the affidavit the FBI released. And then Barack Obama is offering advice to Donald Trump about ICE. He's offering ICE advice to Donald Trump, despite Barack Obama's record here. Okay. Regarding ICE, it's kind of fascinating. He's the one out there offering advice. You probably shouldn't be offering advice at all, my friend. And then I do want to get to Alex Pretti, okay, in the shooting. So Minnesota officials, Tim Walz, Keith Ellison, the attorney general there, they're denouncing claims of self-defense. This is silly. I am going to get to Darren LaHood's statement here first, though. Darren LaHood is a congressman in the 16th District of Illinois. And this is what he said. And I'm really pissed off at Republicans making this a Second Amendment rights issue or a First Amendment rights issue. This is stupid. Your First Amendment was forfeited when you started obstructing justice. So from what I gather, these weren't ICE agents. These were Border Patrol agents, and they were going after an illegal alien from Ecuador, and they were carrying out an operation. And Alex Pretti shoved his phone in their faces and started to obstruct justice. So when you obstruct this operation, so when you do that, you're kind of forfeiting your First Amendment rights. When you have a gun on your person and you start engaging officers and harassing officers, your Second Amendment rights go out the window, okay? Because you become what's called legally a clear imminent danger, okay, with a deadly weapon. And actually, when Renee Good had done what she did with her car, I actually played out a scenario much like this. Had the officers been struggling for a gun. Had she had a gun rather than a vehicle, would we be even having this conversation right now? Turns out there's another guy, another anti-ICE agitator, had a gun, another deadly weapon. A vehicle is also considered a deadly weapon. You've got another deadly weapon here. In this instance, it's a rather than a car, a gun. Okay. When you engage officers like that and they perceive a reasonable threat, perceive you to be a reasonable theft, and their perception, by the way, can be wrong. In order for it can be wrong and still be declared justifiable self-defense. Okay. Now, things would have been different had this would have been just civilians, because in Minnesota, if somebody engages you and has a gun, you are required to run away. Their self-defense laws have been, and Illinois is pretty much the same. Like, you're kind of required to run away as a civilian. If you're not, like, if he doesn't whip out the gun on you, you're required to run away. Now, that doesn't extend to law enforcement. Okay. The Minnesota state law, where, they pretty much require their civilians to not defend themselves through their state laws. But that doesn't extend to law enforcement. Law enforcement, all that needs to happen here is that there has to be a reasonably perceived threat. Okay. If he had a gun, engaged with officers, harassed them, shoved his phone in their faces, and was resisting arrest, which he was, they were struggling. He was not putting his hands behind his back for cuffs. He did not put his hands up. This was a struggle. He was resisting arrest. You are perceived to be a imminent threat, deadly threat, because you have a deadly weapon. This is not a Second Amendment rights issue. It's that his actions, when you're concealed carrying, when you're carrying a gun at all, you have to understand you're carrying a gun. Okay. You have to be a responsible gun owner, and not obstruct federal operations, not harass people, because when you're holding a gun, that is a deadly weapon. If somebody sees that, you are running a very high risk of dying. Okay. And you have to understand that. But anyway, let's get to Darren LaHood's statement. It's sort of dumb. Exercising our First and Second Amendment rights is foundational to the American identity. Yesterday's shooting in Minneapolis is deeply concerning and demands comprehensive and transparent investigation with full cooperation of federal and state and local law enforcement. I support the mission of our federal law enforcement officers and the critical role they play in keeping our community safe. However, with their authority, officers must be held to the highest professional and ethics standards to maintain public trust. Well, I'm going to fight back a little bit on that, Darren LaHood. Yes, they should be held to professional and ethical standards, and I get that. But when somebody's life is in imminent danger, okay, and you could die, nothing really matters. I mean, you can be unethical. For example, I point to the Sonia Massey shooting. That guy was definitely unethical. He was cussing at her. He was not de-escalating the situation. And I understand training and yada, yada, yada. But you are not required. I mean, you are, in order to keep your job, to have high professional ethical standards. But what we really should be arguing is if this shooting was justified legally. Okay. And if the officers were justified in the shooting. Now they can cuss, they can, I would argue that cussing at a suspect is unethical or not professional. Okay. But we live in the real world. Okay. And really, we should just be looking at the legality of this. Okay. The ethics, the professionalism, that is up to Border Patrol to look at, and then fire said individual if they believe that they conducted themselves unethically or unprofessionally, and that would warrant some sort of firing or dismissal of their duties. What I care about is if this was lawful and justified. That's all I really care about at this point. because, to be frank, the anti-ICE agitators, they're not respectful. They're not ethical. They're definitely not acting in a professional manner, because if they were acting in a professional manner, what they would do would go to Congress and change the federal immigration law that they're so pissed off about. They won't do it because it's unconstitutional, and that's not really what this is about. Really what this is about is the elections, the 2026 midterms. That's what this is about, and they want to create chaos for the sake of creating chaos. They don't probably even know what ICE stands for. If you were to ask some of these protesters, hey, what does ICE stand for? They wouldn't be able to tell you. Okay, so Darren LaHood goes on. He says, any use of force must be lawful, justified, and subject to full accountability. Yeah, that's all I care about. I mean, the ethical standards, yeah, sure, the professional standards, but that's not really, if they acted unethically or unprofessionally, then that's kind of up for Border Patrol, the higher ups, to decide if they dismiss those officers from their duties. I'm really just interested in if this was lawful. And I definitely think it was, looking at self-defense law, and we'll get to that. But Alex Pretti, Alex Pretti. Everybody says that he was a nice guy, and maybe he was. I don't know. But their justification for him being like this nice guy, and they did it with Renee Good. She was like a mother, although she enrolled her child in an indoctrination camp, effectively. And the DHS has cited sources where she was a part of ICE Watch, which is what I would call a terrorist organization. ICE Watch group, rapid response teams, they do these virtual trainings, and it's all paid for by your tax dollars, by the way. And that's something, like, your tax dollars are going towards ICE and federal immigration, like at a federal level, your federal tax dollars. But then if you live in states like Minnesota or Illinois, your tax dollars are going to these nonprofits that have been weaponized against the federal government to impede their operations and stop the enforcement of federal law. So they're an open rebellion. And at this point, I am kind of disappointed in President Donald Trump. You've got people dying in the streets in Minnesota, and you still have Governor Tim Walz and now Keith Ellison out there saying that that this wasn't self-defense, despite not citing any kind of evidence or conclusion of an investigation happening. That, like, they're out there denouncing this as self-defense. They're saying that it's not. And Donald Trump needs to invoke the Insurrection Act. These people are obviously an open rebellion of the United States, and I don't care at this point about the optics. Arrest Tim Walz, arrest Governor J.B. Pritzker for being an open rebellion of the United States and weaponizing well-trained militias against federal agents, okay, against federal law enforcement. That's what's going on here. We've got militias that are well-trained and paid for by tax dollars to go out there and cause chaos. So they need to get it under control. So if my advice would be, go in there, start arresting the government officials, start taking by force these local law enforcement agencies. He needs to dig his heels in, and I don't care about the optics anymore. They're going to call you a dictator anyway. They're already doing it. So just go and give them what they want, right? So I'm disappointed. I really hope that Donald Trump invokes the Insurrection Act. Today is January 26th. He has yet to do it, 6:35 a.m. Central Time. So I do want to get to quite a few things this morning. In fact, we do have to talk about a rent control bill, another bad idea coming out of Springfield, Illinois. Rent control returning to Illinois. The debate returns to Illinois. It's so stupid. Rent control, which ultimately will lead to government-only housing, by the way. So we're going to talk about it. But concerning the state of Minnesota, we are living in a cycle of perpetual outrage. And I'll add entitlement to that equation. We've got perpetual outrage, entitlement. These people think that they're entitled. Why? Because they're getting paid by George Soros and billionaires through these NGOs, non-government organizations. So there's just outrage, entitlement. And I already said that, by the way, Alex Pretti, I don't think I expanded on this, that he's such a nice guy because he's an ICU nurse, right? I'm seeing that everywhere, okay? And I'm not going to try to disparage all nurses everywhere. I know there's good ones. I know some great ones, okay? But I will say, statistically speaking, the institutions that are least trusted and disrespected, journalism, media, teaching, and nursing. These are institutions, systems that people no longer respects. Nobody respects these institutions anymore, especially since COVID-19. These nurses were compliant in telling you that you couldn't see grandma for her last breaths. Okay. They were encouraging people to go vaccinate their children, despite children not being at all at risk for COVID-19. They pushed experimental vaccines on you during COVID-19. They also went about, they were complicit in, and if you just did a little bit of research, ivermectin, very effective antiviral, but they were complicit in treatments for COVID-19 that were harming people. Okay, so for example, you have comorbidities, you're obese, you've got, some kidney problems. They would give you remdesivir while you were in the hospital struggling with COVID-19 on a ventilator, and they'd give you remdesivir, and then your organs would ultimately fail. Why? Because you have comorbidities, and remdesivir is a very strong antiviral. Something that would have been more effective would have been giving somebody a round of ivermectin prior to experiencing symptoms or experiencing the first signs of symptoms of COVID-19. So nurses everywhere were complacent, compliant with what I would call medical malpractice. So they have, rightfully so, been deemed untrustworthy, most of them. And I don't know about you, what reality you live in, but I live in reality. And when you go to the hospital, most of the time your experience is very unpleasant. Okay, I can't remember the last conversation I had with somebody where they said, I just absolutely loved my experience at the hospital with all of these nurses. They're snooty, they're snobby. I don't know if it's like a lack of resources or understaffing at these hospitals, but they're angry all the time. And teachers and nurses, we're sicker than ever, and our kids can't read at grade level. This is why there's so much disrespect for these two institutions, the education and nursing and healthcare. There is no respect for these institutions anymore. And largely, I think it's due to the feminization of these institutions. And it's kind of fascinating. Who has the most money funneled into lobbyist groups, and who goes and lobbies government every single day like it's their bread and butter? Teachers and nursing. They've got crazy unions that go and lobby at a federal level, at a state level, and that's all they do all day. You should see the money poured into nursing lobbyists, and poured into teachers' unions to go lobby the government on their behalf. It's insane, which is probably a contributing factor as to why these are very disrespected institutions nowadays. I bring that up because everybody's saying, Alex Pretti was such a nice guy. He was a ICU nurse. You being a nurse does not elevate you to some level of moral superiority. You being a teacher does not elevate you to being some superior being, morally superior being. In fact, I could make the argument that it actually, more likely than not, makes you less respected. I just made my argument. Statistically speaking, We're dumber than ever. The teachers aren't teaching the kids to read. Nurses obviously aren't doing the job that they're supposed to do, which is to heal and make people better because we're sicker than ever. So anyway, I had to get that out off my chest. Really pisses me off when I see he was such a nice guy. He was an ICU nurse. Okay, whatever. Maybe he didn't even really wasn't on the ground. I don't know. But a lot of these nurses, they're nurses, but they don't even spend that much time in the hospital. They actually go lobby the government. They get into the union, and then they go lobby the government, and that's what they do on a day-to-day basis. So they're little activists, right? Just like teachers. Let me get to this, and I'll come back to Alex Pretti, and we're going to break it down frame by frame, and I'll provide you the legal justification. This is an officer, a justified shooting, self-defense, and I'm not going to look at the ethics of it or the professionalism of it, because frankly, that doesn't matter, and that's up for Border Patrol to decide who they allow on their team. And I'm all for accountability. If you think that this was ethically or unethical or unprofessional. I don't even think it was that. I didn't hear any of the ICE agents cussing. I just saw them struggling and trying to arrest somebody who's resisting arrest so vehemently that it required a few officers to bring him down. He went down with a struggle. Did not take it took a little while to bring this guy down. Anyway, Minnesota, like I said, First Amendment, that does not give you the right to harass, attack, or do harm to federal agents. Your First Amendment is, sort of revoked in that situation. It's no longer freedom of speech if you're attacking someone. Okay. Like, what planet do we live on? If you're harassing someone, if you are harming someone, that is no longer freedom of speech. And I don't know what it is with these people, Renee Good, Alex Pretti. They think that criminal illegals need their protection, and they're taking to the streets to protect them. The best thing that you could do would be to go change federal law, right? But they won't do that. They instead would like to gaslight you into thinking that it's not federal law, that you have to be here in this country legally, either an American citizen, naturalized, or here on a temporary visa of some kind. So they're demanding justice for these activists, Renee Good, Alex Pretti, who got themselves killed. And, it's next level insanity. Like, there's got to be heavy drug use. There's got to be next level deception or a combination of both in order to go out there, think that these criminal illegals need your help. And here's the problem with liberals. They don't understand that these people who come from a third world don't think like them. They think these liberals, Alex Pretti, Renee Good, everybody just wants free healthcare. Everybody just wants to love and be accepting and inclusive. Well, I'll tell you right now, the illegal criminal aliens that ICE is apprehending, they don't think like you bleeding heart liberal. Okay. I can tell you right now, the Somalian is not thinking about healthcare and gay marriage or whatever, like woke BS that consumes your thoughts all day. I promise you, they're not thinking about that. Okay. And the problem with liberals is they project their ideologies onto these third world country type people. And it couldn't be further from that. Their ideologies couldn't be any, look at the Somalian people believe in honor killings. They believe in incestual marriage. They're radical when it comes to their Muslim faith. So yeah, there is very little that you have in common with these people. You are projecting your ideology onto them, and you think that they need you to defend you or need you to come to their defense. So the protests have gone fully off the rails. Coordinated attack actually happened, and we've covered this at length here on this program. Smash the like button, subscribe to the channel. We've covered it at length, this ambush of this church. It's so much worse than we thought, guys. Okay, so they went in, we saw a video of them terrorizing the congregants who just simply came to the church to worship, okay? So let me give you some background, and then we'll get into the new stuff, this affidavit that the FBI released. So these so-called social justice warriors stormed the city's church in St. Paul, Minnesota. It was in the middle of their worship service, and they went in there based on this premise that one of the church's pastors was associated with ICE. Turns out that's not true, hasn't been proven true. The former CNN anchor, fired CNN anchor, Don Lemon, decided to join the terrorists, live streamed the event, the protest, and he called it journalism. He was outside in the parking lot saying that we're going to go in there, and he associated himself with the activists. Social media posts show that he was tagged. He was thanked for his appearance at the protest by the protest organizer. So one of the activists here who stormed the church even used scripture. At first they said, "Oh, well, we stormed the church because we believe one of the pastors had an affiliation with ICE." Turns out that's not true. And then one of the agitators said, "Well, actually, we stormed the church because judgment begins at the house of God." And he cited Hebrews 10:31, which says, "It is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God." We know that God is not just comforting and gentle, but he is alive, holy, and just. Okay. And to fall into his hands in this context in Hebrews 10:31, it is to face God's judgment. Okay. Especially after knowingly rejecting the truth or knowingly doing wrong without any kind of repentance. He is a just and merciful God. Okay. So this person, I don't think he really understands what he and his little cohorts did here. They're going to be judged now. And I think that they may have gotten into more trouble than they bargained for. They said, "Oh, well, we're going to be judging the people who are in the house of God here." Yeah, well, now you're going to be judged, like actually in a court of law and judged by God as well. So Attorney General Pam Bondi, she filed charges, not against Don Lemon, which was stupid, but whatever. They did file charges. Yay. I know a judge didn't sign off on it, the arrest warrant. Hey, look, you could find one. Okay. Joe Biden did it with Mark Huck. They busted into his house at 3 a.m., took him in front of his children, shackled him. Mark Huck was a pro-life activist who was outside an abortion clinic praying and then was confronted by an abortion clinic worker, and that worker engaged him and his son, and he punched the worker in the face, and then they busted into his house at 3 a.m. for it. Like Pam Bondi, if she really had the cojones, she could have gotten Don Lemon too, but whatever. She is going against Nakima Levi Armstrong. This was the woman who organized, coordinated the ambush. There's also Chantanelle Allen, a school board member, self-proclaimed educator, and activist. Isn't it funny? Like nurses, professors, teachers, like they're all activists. Very disrespected institutions, like I said. William Kelly is also another one who is going to be charged. So Armstrong and Allen were arrested last week, and then on Friday, they were arrested on Thursday and apprehended, and Kelly was apprehended on Thursday as well. On Friday, all three of them were released pending court proceedings. Okay. Now, I saw this very damning video. You saw the videos of the church ambush. Okay. Now, we've got an FBI affidavit that has come out now. And this was an affidavit that supported the warrant, the arrest warrants of all three of them. And what this affidavit reveals is a deep, deep, deep level of verbal violence, chaos, and chaos that these agitators caused. And this wasn't originally reported. Okay, we didn't see any of this in the viral video that was exposed that showed them ambushing the church. Okay, so what's in the affidavit? Well, I'll tell you. Witnesses attested that parents were being blocked from retrieving their children. Agitators were screaming in the faces of their children, and one person ended up breaking their arm. Okay, now this is all evidence. Okay, so one person broke their arm trying to escape from the chaos. This was so much worse than just people storming and being loud in a church service. Okay, so ahead of the DOJ charges, Armstrong, the leader of the whole thing, Nakimia or whatever, the BLM activist, she attempted to downplay her and her band of agitators. She downplayed this, and she said that they didn't cause any harm, she even had the nerve to go on some of these talking head shows and said that they participated in the worship service. So Armstrong, she probably realized that the hammer was going to fall and it was going to fall hard, and they know what they did. Okay. Somebody broke their arm that day. Parents could not obtain their children from like a little children's Sunday school. They went to go grab their children after the service was ambushed, and they were prohibited by the agitators from grabbing their children. They were screaming in the faces of children that their parents were going to be going to hell. So this Nikita woman, Armstrong, she was on CNN, and she gave a very fascinating spin here. And I think that she realized that the hammer was going to come down and the judgment was going to come down hard on her, and she's facing serious charges. She claimed that they didn't rush the church, that they actually sat down and participated in service. Well, I don't know about you, but I saw a different video. Okay. And there's interviews, there's documented interviews in this affidavit. And this makes her look really bad. Nakima Armstrong. Okay. She's the ringleader. So in the interview, Nakima, this BLM activist, she said, "You can't pretend to be a house of God while harboring someone who is directing ICE agents to wreak havoc upon our community and who killed Renee Good." Okay, so page 11 of the affidavit, and I just took it right out of paragraph 29. You guys can go check it out. Some of the names are redacted, but while at the church, redacted interviewed Armstrong, okay, who stated, "I told Inaudible that victim one is a pastor here, and he also serves as the director field office for ICE in St. Paul." Redacted asked, "Are you sure he's a," and then Armstrong answered, "Yes." Okay, so interrupts the question, says, "Yes, she's for certain that he's a field director," although nothing has come out that this pastor is involved at this field office at all. Okay, so the city's church, she said, "Yes, city's church. That's why we were here. We're demanding justice for Renee Good and letting them know that this will not stand. They can't pretend to be the house of God while harboring someone who's directing ICE agents to wreak havoc upon our community and who killed Renee Good. Enough is enough. I am a reverend on top of being a lawyer and an activist." You know, isn't it so sad? Like, I don't know, liberals, they always like wear such a badge of honor of what they do. Like if they're a teacher, if they're a nurse, like that is like their whole personality. And it's like so bizarre. And I think really what it comes down to is biblically, we're called to do one thing, and that's to live for him. And these people are so caught up in living for themselves. They wear like these titles as like their whole entire personality and as a badge of honor. I want to be remembered for one thing. I want to be remembered for my faith, and I want to be remembered. I want to be a good and faithful servant Like, that is the only thing that I'm concerned about. And like, yes, I'm a podcaster. Yes, I write a little bit. I'm a writer. But at the end of the day, I really don't even tell people that. They just wear it like such a badge of honor, like, this is who I am. And it's really quite sad. It just shows me that you live a very superficial life. But she said, I'm an activist and I'm a lawyer. So Armstrong, she says she's a reverend. Okay. That's interesting because this day when they ambushed the church, she was not being a reverend. She was kind of being a judge, jury, and executioner. And her cohort, William Kelly, is also interviewed in this affidavit, and he's even worse. So during redacted broadcast, Armstrong and Allen are observing, yelling, "Ice out." Kelly can also be heard, "This ain't God's house. This is the house of the devil." And based on my review of William Kelly's numerous social media, and this is the FBI affidavit, I recognize Kelly's voice on the video saying those words. So he said, "This is the house of the devil." William Kelly, these people are so bitter and angry. It's truly horrible that these activists, they blocked distressed parents from being able to get their children. They yelled in children's faces. In fact, on page 18 of the affidavit, there is a victim 4, informed agents that members of the congregation had attempted to retrieve their children from childcare located down the stairs, but the agitators were blocking the stairs and the parents were unable to get their children. Victim 4 recalled one agitator was so threatening, so aggressive, and so intimidating towards the congregants. And there was an agitator who was screaming in the faces of these parents and screaming in the faces of these young children. The agitator screamed in the faces of these children, and they began to cry. Who does that? Like, what's wrong with you? Screaming in the face of a child. One victim even recalled the child stating to him, "Daddy, I thought you were going to die." Victim 6 ended the interview and acknowledged that his children were traumatized and said that his children are traumatized. You think? Also in the affidavit, this is crazy. The invasion of the city's church, so much worse than we thought. Horrifying new details. Agitators were blocked from going downstairs collecting their children. And in fact, one kid was screamed at by an agitator, according to a witness, "Your parents are Nazis. They're going to burn in hell," and screamed in their faces and told this to a child. So I don't know what the hell happened here, where Thursday they were arrested, they were released on Friday. Shame on the judge's decision to allow these agitators, these terrorists, to be released on bail. That should not have happened. Somebody's arm was broken that day. This invasion is an atrocity. This is actually, these people did nothing wrong. They were worshiping. This is called First Amendment. And shame on the Civil Rights Division and the DOJ. They should be going after this harder. They really should, because we are going to have agitators, terrorist activists. I don't know, whatever you freaking want to call these people. You're going to have these people going into worship services everywhere because they think it's okay, seeing that their little buddies, were released the next day. Now, maybe a lawsuit that the city church files. I haven't seen them file it yet, but they're going to file a lawsuit. Maybe that's going to impose some sort of monetary civil fine. I don't know. But justice has to be served. And they really should have gone after Don Lemon, made a statement. So this is just so much worse than we thought it was. Okay. What happened at City's Church? Somebody broke their arm. Children were told their parents were going to burn in hell. Parents were blocked from collecting their children from childcare down the stairs of the church. That's insane. And more should be done. All right. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison. They made some remarks about the shooting of Alex Pretti. So there was a shooting, Border Patrol agents. Okay, these weren't ICE agents. There was a struggle in Minneapolis, and I've watched it frame by frame. We can do that here. I just don't even think it's necessary because there is legal justification here to really, I think it's a self-defense of the officers. They were acting in self-defense. This looks like it might just be a justified shooting. Now, maybe there's details that I can't see, don't hear, but just from looking at the video, looks like a justified shooting to me. And knowing the law, self-defense law, yeah, it looks like a justified shooting to me. And we'll get into my sources and why I'm saying that. But Tim Walz, his remarks, he made some remarks and they were full on disgraceful. He's trying to whip up people even more against federal law enforcement. This shouldn't come as a shock to you that another person is dead, because I said that somebody else is going to die at the hands of ICE agents or federal law enforcement, because Walz and other Minnesota officials are encouraging people to engage these officers and obstruct operations. And that is just inviting the risk of death. Okay. So he's whipping up people against federal law enforcement. He claimed that Pretti was murdered in front of the whole world. Very terrible. Darren LaHood, he released a statement and he goes, any use of force must be lawful, justified. And he goes, however, these authority officers have to be held to the highest professional and ethical standards. They should be, I don't dismiss that. But this shooting, I mean, he's almost indicating that this is not lawful, justified in his statement. Like, he's suggesting that could not be or it could not be a possibility where this is lawful, justified shooting. Okay. And doing anything or saying anything like if this is justified or not at this time is jumping the gun. It's getting as an official. Okay. Now I'm going to sit here and say that I think it's justified. But that doesn't have any crazy implications. When you're an official like Governor Tim Walz, Darren LaHood, and there's not an official conclusion to the investigation, and you go out there and you say things like, Pretti was murdered in front of the entire world, yeah, and you don't wait for the facts, you've tainted the investigation. Okay. So I'm not tainting the investigation by saying that I think that it's justified. Because I'm not in some sort of official capacity, and I'm not going to be involved in these investigations. Federal government and state government have to work together and investigate, present the facts, and prove whether this was a justified shooting or not. So he praised Pretti, Governor Tim Walz. He, of course, probably tainted the investigation in his state that is supposed to happen, where they're supposed to collect facts, by saying that he's murdered already. Okay. And he called for resistance and more resistance that has led to these confrontations and has put people in situations where they die. Activists, that puts people, activists, agents alike in danger when you call for resistance. Okay. He couldn't get the facts right when he spoke. I'm going to play the clip here. And he claimed that Pretti was shot by ICE, not by Border Patrol. He was shot by a Border Patrol agent. And that doesn't, help him with his stoking of fear against ICE agents. Okay. And hate against ICE agents specifically, which is probably why he referred to the Border Patrol agent as ICE agent, because he wants to push a narrative out there that ICE agents are to be hated, and he called for ICE agents to be pulled out of Minnesota before they kill another person. So he talked about Alex Pretti, he talked about Renee Good, and he didn't want to talk about the stories of people being raped, killed, murdered by illegal aliens who ICE have and other federal agencies have removed from our communities. He didn't want to talk about Gabriel Calixto out of Springfield, who stabbed Emma Schaefer to death, allegedly. He didn't want to talk about Laken Riley. He didn't want to talk about Narunge. What's her name? Narunge. Hang on. Jocelyn Narungre. He didn't want to talk about her. Okay, he just wanted to talk about Renee Good and Alex Pretti. Funny how that works. So Walz asked, during this news conference or appearance that, what side do you want to be on? Do you want to be the side of the all-powerful federal government who can kill and kidnap citizens? Or do you want to be on the side of peaceful citizens? Don't know what's so peaceful about using your deadly weapon against agents, federal law enforcement. Don't know what's so peaceful about biting the fingers off of ICE agents, which has happened at these protests. He even said that they are being occupied right now. So he's in open rebellion. And by the way, the all-powerful federal government, you guys have enough power to take down these federal government, federal agencies, which is why they need more and more and more and more. Why do you have all that power? Because you're backed by billionaires like George Soros and these nonprofit organizations, and the Minnesota taxpayers are funding this war on both sides. This is a war, and I wish Donald Trump would get it together and invoke the Insurrection Act and come in and start arresting these people for being in open rebellion. But today is January 26th, and he has yet to do that. Anyway, so no one's being kidnapped. And if you're hitting agents with your car, if you're obstructing their operations, biting off their fingers, you're not being peaceful. The only occupation I see here is the occupation with trying to resist federal law enforcement and defend illegals. Okay, like they're not like less powerful than the federal agency. I would argue that they are really winning the war. Some of these anti-ICE agitators who are being paid, and I don't know about you, but it feels like they're winning. And that shouldn't be the case. And the federal government needs to step up and win this war. And how do you do that? You take out the leader, the top. And that should be through treason charges, rebellion charges, Tim Walz. Okay. So he said this isn't a political debate anymore. It's a moral one. Let's take a listen to what he had actually said in the conference. Here we go.
No longer having a political debate. We're having a moral debate. We all want secure borders and immigration enforcement that prioritizes criminals. And I want to thank the press, especially the local press, who has done a deep dive to show that's exactly what Minnesota does. But what you're seeing is not common sense, lawful, or humane enforcement. That's not what this occupation is about.
Oh, so annoying. I like this comment. You're so brain rotted. Real TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. So you think calling ICE Nazis or Gestapo is wrong? Yeah, I do think that's wrong. I mean, people are entitled to their First Amendment. Like, that's not going to the extent of biting fingers, obstructing justice with while being armed, or wielding your car, your deadly weapon, a car, against an ICE agent. Of course, when state officials like Governor J.B. Pritzker or Tim Walz does this, where they call, ICE agents Gestapo or ICE agents Nazis, that fuels, hatred towards ICE agents, which leads to these confrontations that ultimately get people killed or hurt severely. For example, the ICE agent who was rammed with a car by Renee Good, he had internal injuries, internal bleeding. You can hear it in the video very clearly. There's a big thunk. He got hit. There's a bullet in the front shield, which indicates that he shot at her from the front at first to try to stop her from wielding the deadly weapon against him. Yeah, I think it's wrong. That is First Amendment. You can call them Nazis, Gestapo. But let me ask you, Toe F Jut, in the comment section, let me ask you this. Do you think it would be better if Alex Pretti, Renee Good, who obviously had, lives to live, he had an occupation, ICU nurse, liked the outdoors, was a big outdoorsman, had family. Renee Good had a child and a spouse. Do you think that it would have been more productive for those individuals to change federal immigration law? And can you recognize that it is currently illegal in this country to reside in this country without some sort of citizenship, naturalization, or temporary status? Can we agree on that? Because I think that the problem here is that people like you and the left, they really don't understand that there is something called federal law. And if you don't like it, that's okay. We have a process where you can go change that rule. You go lobby your legislators, you go knock on their doors, you ask them to introduce a bill that gets debated in committee. And if it advances out of committee, it goes to the floor and then they vote on it. That's the process. Had Alex Pretti done that, had Renee Good done that, that would have been more productive than taking to the streets, and they'd be alive for their families today. And it goes to show the type of person that they are. They would rather cause chaos that is not productive. And for the sake of creating chaos, they would rather go do that, put their lives at risk and get themselves killed rather than actually do something for the immigrant community, which is to change federal law. Now, I won't get into how that's unconstitutional, and we have to have a sovereign nation, and that's dictated by our U.S. Constitution. And sovereignty means that we are recognized as a nation with borders. And that's why federal law has never been changed. It's because it's unconstitutional to change it. But you can try, and that can be up to a court to decide. The Supreme Court ultimately would probably decide the constitutionality of open borders. Okay. And that can be done. If a law is crafted, adopted, somebody challenges that law in court based on its constitutionality, that goes through the court system. Like there's a way to go about this. You are just literally killing yourself if you're going and you're protesting and obstructing ICE operations. You are asking for death. Okay. And that's just idiotic. It's delusion. There's probably heavy drugs involved, both a combination of both. So he's on Tim Walz is on the wrong side of history here. Okay. He doesn't have a leg to stand on. His state, between the massive fraud, which is why all of these ICE operations are happening in Minnesota specifically. They'll tell you it's because Donald Trump lost Minnesota a few election cycles, and that's why Donald Trump is occupying Minnesota, because it's out of revenge. So stupid. No, there was massive fraud. We're talking hundreds, possibly $100 billion over the course of 10 years. This has been going on since 2015, where Somalian daycares are empty and they're funneling taxpayer dollars into these Somalian daycares, and there is no services being provided to the taxpayers in exchange for their money. Rather, these people are taking that money, Somalian immigrants, are taking that money, living lavish lifestyles, or turning around and opening up restaurants to host Ilhan Omar and her campaign parties. Like, okay, so he doesn't have a leg to stand on. There's massive fraud there, which is why these ICE operations are happening. They want to deport the Somalians who are scamming the Minnesota government out of hundreds of billions of taxpayer dollars, scamming you, the residents of Minnesota. Plus, Tim Walz, he has incited, chaos. against immigration agents. He has helped incite this violence that has led to the deaths of Renee Good and Alex Pretti. They had a hand in their own death. Don't get me wrong. Good and pretty. Pretty good. Ironic. But they did it to themselves. There was a different avenue. They chose the risky one. Okay. And, this is so vile, I guess, to want to enforce laws passed by Congress where our representatives pass these laws. Okay. This is how the system works. And then enforcement enforces those laws. It's called the three branches of power. This is a very basic civics course. And I get it. Teachers, they stopped teaching and they became activists. And a lot of people don't know this. But here's Tim Walz comparing federal immigration, law enforcement of our rightly passed laws, our just democratically passed laws passed by Congress. Here he is comparing that to the killing of Anne Frank, which is just hilarious. Take a listen.
We have got children in Minnesota hiding in their houses, afraid to go outside. Many of us grew up reading that story of Anne Frank. Somebody's going to write that children's story about Minnesota. And there's one person who can end this now.
There's one person who can end this now. This is not like Anne Frank at all, okay? Nazi, Gestapo. They weren't following or enforcing laws that were passed by a duly elected, democratically selected Congress. Okay, that is not what the Gestapo and Nazi Party were doing. And it's just pathetic. And it's weak. Where Tim Walz is, saying here, what's the plan? I'll tell you what the plan is. Work with the federal law enforcement, get the local police department in on this, and have them apprehend and detain people, whether they're criminally illegal. So on top of entering the crime or entering the country illegally, and then they commit another crime and they stumble upon the fact that they are also illegal in this country. Don't direct local law enforcement to release them out onto the streets. Keep them apprehended. Call up federal law enforcement and say, hey, we've got somebody for you to deport. This person had run a traffic light and we stumbled upon their status. Get some cooperation going here. Countless Republican and Democrat-led cities have done this, where they are cooperating with ICE for these mass deportations. Why? Because it was mandated by the people in 2024. We didn't like the open borders under Joe Biden. And we said, hey, we want Donald Trump to conduct mass deportations when we elected him to be president. Don't like it? Change it the next election cycle, okay? Isn't it funny how there's only riots and protests during when Republicans are in control of the House or presidency or Senate? I never noticed protests under, Joe Biden. It's almost like they use violence to get their way. And I don't know about you, but that's not democracy. We're defenders of democracy, says the Democrats. Interesting. Every time you're not in power, you, like a baby, throw a fit and start killing people in the streets and setting things on fire. That doesn't sound like pro-democracy for me. It sounds like you're trying to get back in power. So, really what's happening is the electorate, they see this, and they're like, shoot, I just want to be safe in my communities. And if they are going to act like this, I'm just going to vote them back in power because I'm scared. And that's the point we're getting to here, folks, where I'm scared to not vote Democrats in anymore. I'm starting to get freaked out that, hey, if I don't vote Democrats in, they're going to burn my city down and they're going to get violent. Get these cities to cooperate, Tim, and get them to cooperate with federal law enforcement, get your local police to cooperate with federal law enforcement, detain illegals, and alert ICE when you have an illegal detainee in your local jail. Okay, like that's period full, like that would solve this this whole thing. There would be no mass protests, there would be no rioting, there would be no need for ICE to be out in the streets, because you'd have local law enforcement working with federal agents and cooperating with each other, and they wouldn't have to go conduct these sweeps or operations. They could just work with the local jails and get the illegals there. Okay. I'm not even saying that the local jails have to, find out who's illegal in their communities. That's not what I'm asking for, because I understand, like, hey, local taxpayer dollars, we're not paying for that at a local level. We're paying for that at a federal level. That's their job. But if you happen upon an illegal immigrant who commits a crime outside of hopping the border or being in this country illegally, and you're a local officer, you should be obligated to pass that individual off to the federal authorities when you find out that, hey, they also broke federal immigration law. So let's take a listen. This is Keith Ellison. Ellison claimed that they are suffering targeted oppression. And I think it's fascinating. All these other states, they're doing what they can to help law enforcement. All the other states, the only ones that I'm seeing that are doing this are New York-ish, California, Illinois, Minnesota, and Portland, Oregon. Okay, so like that's the only states who aren't working. Like it's a handful of states that are in rebellion. Like why can't they just comply with federal law and stop inciting their citizenry against, not going beyond inciting, paying for inciting and creating a well-funded militia against the federal government? Why can't you just act like all the other states? Obviously, you're the outlier, Minnesota. Everybody else has gotten on board with this federal law and cooperating with the federal government. Why can't you? So Ellison claimed that they're targeted because Trump wasn't voted in Minnesota, which is just nonsense. Let's take a listen. Here we go.
Now, as I noted a moment ago, people will ask, well, why Minnesota? I'll say this. Minnesota is dealing with targeted oppression from the federal government because of who we are and who we value. Minnesota is a place where we welcome the stranger. We have a number of nonprofits that focus on refugee resettlement in Minnesota. Minnesota is a place where we take care of the vulnerable among us. We're a state that just passed paid family leave. We're a state that believes in feeding our kids who are in school, and we're a state that believes that Minnesota is a great place to live for everyone, no matter where you were born. Of course, we obey all laws, but we still believe that immigration is not a sin. They're coming after our state, in my view, because of what we stand for, because we voted 3 times in favor of somebody not Donald Trump, which he has publicly said he resents deeply and believes is not even true. I can tell you it's not about fraud. Because if he sent people who understand forensic accounting, we'd be having a different conversation. But he's sending armed, masked men. This is a pretext, and it's not supported by the facts at all, which has brought us to court challenging the justification that the president has offered. For those watching around the country, I would submit to you that just as Portland and Chicago and LA were precursors to Minneapolis, Minneapolis is a precursor to a whole lot of other places that they have their eye on right here, right now, including Maine and several other states. If we don't stop this behavior here, it will only expand, and it won't be good for anyone in our country.
Oh, so frustrating. Love this comment in 2018. Karen Mahanan former girlfriend of Minnesota Attorney General, who's Muslim, by the way, accused him of emotional and physical abuse. Something to think about. Yeah, a lot of these people have like really dirty, a lot of Democrat officials have some crazy, dirty laundry in their hampers. Okay. Tim Walz. Something is so weird about Minnesota. Like, I'm just going to throw this out there, and I'm not trying to be conspiratorial or tin hat wearing, but weird that the Minnesota woman, the House Speaker who got shot, what was her name? House Speaker shot, I think she was the Speaker, Vance Bolter, indicted for the Minnesota House of Representatives Speaker, Melissa Hortman, and her husband, Mark Hortman, the shooting of Minnesota Senator. Like, very weird. Okay. Vance Bolter, we know, worked with on Tim Walz's campaign. Like, his wife, Vance Bolter's wife, worked on the campaign of Tim Walz when he was running for Congress. Very weird. Then we have George Floyd happened there in 2020. We have Renee Good. Now we have Alex Pretti. Like, I don't know. It's just complete chaos there. And there's a lot of questions. The Somali fraud has been going on. Well, I say Somali, it's just fraud, taxpayer fraud to the tunes of billions of dollars. Melissa Hartman, thank you for saving me in the chat. She died. That was weird. He was an appointee of Tim Walz, and then Vance Bolter's wife worked on the campaign of Governor Tim Walz when he was running for Congress. It's bizarre. The corruption, the shadiness that goes on in Minnesota. Look, folks, Keith Ellison, he says that they follow the laws. They're not. And he says immigration isn't a sin. Well, no, it's not a sin, I guess, if you are following the laws of the country. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about people who border hop and overstay their visas. That's who ICE is going after. Point to any of these operations. These are illegal immigrants from places like Ecuador, Venezuela, and on top of, most of the time, committing the crime of entering the country illegally and not through a port of entry. They're committing other crimes like stealing, drugs. Okay. Because it's almost like if you're willing to commit federal crime by hopping the border, you're pretty much okay with doing anything. And that leads to even more crime. Tells me all I really need to know about you as a person. You commit one crime, like, ultimately you're going to have to commit other crimes as an illegal immigrant because you're illegally here. You can't obtain lawful employment. And you might seek something like drug dealing. Okay. Happens. So DHS is deporting more people in other areas right now, like Texas. Texas is cooperating. And there's no agitators there, no protests. Really what this is, it's a failure to cooperate, and it's just a few states. Like, we're only talking about Illinois, Oregon, and Minnesota, really. Heck, I don't even think that New York has been as apprehensive as Illinois in Chicago or Minneapolis in Minnesota has been. I don't even think New York is all that apprehensive to the federal, because they need these people out of here because it's not sustainable. Sovereignty is not evil. Okay. The immigration he's talking about is just doing away with sovereignty and having an open border. So Ellison claimed that the focus wasn't on fraud and that he's sending masked men. Well, yeah, I mean, the agitators are biting the fingers off of these ICE agents at this point. Of course, they're going to be masked, right? Not to mention, it's really cold in Minnesota and Chicago. Since they've been doing some of these operations, covering their faces is honestly a form of protection from doxing, from these ICE agents getting their families doxxed, which has happened several times. But not only that, I think it's like quite literally a physical thing. Like, hey, I'm going to cover my skin as much as I can because they're scratching me, they're biting me, and I'm going to cover up my face. They're also using things like tear gas, on the agitators. And, the mask is honestly a form of protection, both, from doxing, but also concealing their identity. But it's not like they don't identify themselves. Like they're trying to act like ICE is written across their freaking chests and they got badges. Like it's not like they're not identifying themselves before conducting these operations. They say, hey, we're ICE, stop. And then there's typically some sort of resistance or fleeing from, said illegal immigrants during these operations. And then they go and they cuff them. Okay. Hey, this is immigration customs enforcement. Stop where you are, put your hands up. And then they don't listen, and then they go and chase them. So like they're identifying themselves, and maybe some of them aren't, but like, let's be real. They've got ICE written across their chest. Like, come on now. Like, stop spinning this as if this is like, they're secretly, going after these people. And to be honest with you, federal law enforcement, they go undercover, to conduct some of these operations. And, it's all done by the book, probably for the most part. And if there are bad apples in ICE, then yeah, deal with them. But from what I can see, a lot of the ICE, all of the ICE agents in the Renee Good case and in the Alex Pretti case, these two videos, these viral videos, they've got ICE written across their chests, and in most cases, they've got badges and guns, and they ask Alex Pretti and Renee Good to get out of the car, put your hands up, we're arresting you, like, and then they resist. So it's not like they're like deceptively going in and cuffing people, and not identifying themselves in what they're doing before they go to do it. Okay. So I'm going to play another Ellison clip. He's trying to stop the operation, I guess. Take a listen.
It is at the fundamental, it is in the DNA of American history that the federal government cannot trample over the prerogatives of the state. And that is exactly what is happening here, and that is exactly why we're going to court.
Yeah, so he's going to court, and yeah, good luck with that. Right. Going to court. He's moved to stop these operations, going to court. Now, Illinois did stop somewhat the Operation Midway Blitz in Chicago because they said that you can't use National Guard, but the Supreme Court actually opened up a door for Donald Trump to go in with the Marines. And I don't know what it is. Maybe it's optics, like ahead of the 2026 midterms. Like, even the Supreme Court is kind of saying, like, okay, Trump, it's time to get serious now. Like, the National Guard, like, don't use those guys first. Use the Marines, 82nd Airborne. Like, you have the Army at your disposal. You can use them if you're going to declare some sort of emergency in Chicago or Minneapolis. You can go get the Marines in there. That's what I think needs to happen, is he needs to deploy the military at this point, because this is open rebellion and obstruction. They're funding militias against the federal government. I guess it's gotten pretty bad. And I don't know if it's the 2026 optics, and that's why he's not doing it, because, he's a dictator. He launched the Marines against U.S. citizens or whatever, and that's going to be their thing. But, like, who cares? They're already calling you that, right? I think he's about ready to find out, Keith Ellison, here in court, that he's not above federal law, and that you can't change federal law by bitching. Okay, like, that's quite literally what they're doing in Chicago, in Minnesota. Governor J.B. Pritzker and Tim Walz are getting behind microphones, and they're bitching about federal law that they don't want to be a thing anymore. And that's not how you change it. You change it by getting your congressman to introduce a bill that says, hey, we're going to do away with this thing that says that you have to have citizenship or some sort of temporary status. We're going to do away with this code. Let's amend the law and not require citizenship to be here in the country. They can try it for sure, but they won't, because that actually would require, a level of IQ that the Somalians in Minnesota don't have, bananas and rice, right? And that would actually require some like real work rather than just whipping up chaos for the sake of whipping up chaos. So I'm going to shift gears. Let's talk about Barack Obama. Because he's providing advice to Donald Trump. He's become, of course, the lecturer in chief. Nobody really asked for your input, Barack, but whatever. Michelle Obama, she complains about racism and cries about, it's so weird. She was in a podcast talking about how she like felt weird for wearing shorts or something. And like this was weird. She cries about racism. She complains about her fluffy life. Former President Barack Obama is using this tragedy, and it is a tragedy. Like, I don't want Alex Pretti to die. I don't want Renee Good to die. They had families. They had lives that they were living. They're humans. Now, should they be elevated to a level of moral superiority? Absolutely not. They were probably terrible terrible characters, or had terrible characteristics. When you look at the fruits of their life, right? When you look at Renee Good, like her child was quite literally enrolled in an indoctrination camp. When you look at Alex Pretti, he was an ICU nurse. I would argue that kind of made him, disrespected. And in most circles, people don't respect nurses and teachers anymore. These are highly, highly disrespected institutions for good reasons. Statistically, they're not doing what they're set out to do, or what they're designed to do, which is to teach people and to heal people. We're dumber than ever, and we're sicker than ever. So highly disrespected institutions. That didn't give him some sort of moral superiority being a nurse. Renee Good wasn't like morally superior because she was a mother. Okay. Silly. So Barack Obama, he becomes lecturer in chief here, and he says that things ought to be handled, a certain way, because he was so successful when he was a two-term president. Okay. Although this is the same guy who engineered a coup against President Donald Trump 45 and was the puppet master of the Auto Pens administration, Joe Biden Auto Pens administration. But as long as he's still around, Barack Obama, he's going to insert himself and be lecturer in chief when he's not welcome and when nobody really likes him. Okay. So in wake of the Saturday shooting in Minneapolis, ICU nurse, because he's so respected because he was an ICU nurse. Alex Pretti, he had brought a loaded gun to a protest. Now, there's a lot of, and we'll get to Alex Pretti because I haven't really talked about the ins and outs. This gun, it's a SIG something. They're known for going off sometimes. What sounded to me, it almost sounded like Alex Pretti his gun might have gone off, and then that led to rapid fire from the police. I don't know. That's just kind of going around gun communities because they know that this gun has had some issues. But really, at the end of the day, he brought a loaded gun to a protest, which doesn't inherently make it justifiable for Border Patrol agents to shoot him. Okay, I want to be clear about that. It's what he did while armed that caused the justification for the shooting. Okay, so let's get something straight here. It's not like Alex Pretti wasn't doing anything and he was just sitting there at a protest. Okay, he was engaging with federal law enforcement or the Border Patrol agents, and he was getting in their faces, harassing them, and then ultimately obstructing their operation of getting this Ecuador illegal immigrant. They were performing an operation, and Pretti had come in between agents, Border Patrol agents, and this Ecuador immigrant. And what they were going to do was arrest Pretti. And he started to resist arrest. He started to fight and not put his hands behind his back. Then the gun was in his holster in his waistband. Some videos, it looks like he might have reached for it. Other videos, it doesn't. It's really hard to tell. You kind of go by it frame by frame. But it doesn't matter at the end of the day, because he was obstructing justice or obstructing this operation. He was resisting arrest, and it wasn't the fact that he had a gun. Okay. And I see this Kyle Rittenhouse BS where they're comparing Alex Pretti to Kyle Rittenhouse, which is so freaking rich. People really don't know. Like, if you're doing that, you are insane. And I've seen Republicans doing this. Like, what? Anyway, so Kyle Rittenhouse shot, by the way, convicted pedophile, convicted, served time for pedophilia in self-defense. There was a skateboard that was wielded against him as a weapon, and he was protecting private property, by the way, Kyle Rittenhouse. This was in public. This was on the sidewalk where Alex Pretti had went and engaged federal officers, not pedophiles. Okay. Kyle Rittenhouse didn't even engage these individuals. These individuals engaged him. They hit him with a skateboard. He shot them and killed them. And then later was found in court to be justified in self-defense. Okay. So comparing Alex Pretti to Kyle Rittenhouse is insanity to me. He was protecting private property from looters, rioters during the Floyd riots. And some of these looters and rioters were known, convicted criminals who wielded weapons against him, and then he shot them in defense of himself. Okay, so no comparison here. Anyway, so he brought a loaded gun to the protest, which isn't inherently like make him make it right for Border Patrol to shoot him. It's what he did while having a loaded handgun. Anyway, he ended up losing his life, and President Petty Barack Obama, I like to call him that, petty, because he just seems to get pettier and pettier and pettier as time goes on. But he was like white knighting it for Alex Pretti on X, and he wanted to give some advice. And I'm going to go kind of like line by line here with the statement. Barack Obama. Hold on. Let me pull up his statement so you guys can kind of follow along here. Hoping I can find it. Here it is. This is on X. He's white knighting it. Obama begins, he says, the killing of Alex Pretti is a heartbreaking tragedy. It should be a wake-up call for every American, regardless of party. And many of our core values as a nation are increasingly under assault. So let me pull this up for you. Here you are. Kind of small. So we're going to go piece by piece. I don't know what he's talking about when he says core values are under assault. What core values are you talking about? Yes, safety, security. That's all under assault from the agitators who are confronting these ICE agents, Border Patrol agents, while conducting operations, deportation operations. Not being afraid of criminal illegals who are going to rape and murder me and ram me with a car or kill me with a commercial truck, a semi truck on the highway because they obtain CDLs from sanctuary cities and states, right? Like, yeah, that's under assault. Like my value of not being afraid. I don't want to be afraid of criminal illegals raping me, murdering me, and hitting me with their semi trucks on the highway. Like, yeah, that's under attack. My ability to like move about freely in my country without fear, that is under attack. Or is it the core value of not having your First Amendment and other civil liberties violated? So I think that's what he's talking about here. He's saying that these protesters have First Amendment rights and civil liberties and that they shouldn't be violated because they're peacefully protesting. They're not peacefully protesting. Remember, during the George Floyd riots, mostly peaceful protests, and in the background, they're lighting things on fire. That's not First Amendment, okay? Hitting someone in the face is not the First Amendment. See, they try to redefine things, and it pisses me off. Like, they're trying to gaslight you into thinking that it's not federal law to be a U.S. citizen and to have temporary status of some kind or naturalization in order to be here. They're trying to gaslight you into thinking that that's not how things work in this country. They're also trying to gaslight you into thinking that your First Amendment right is punching somebody in the face or biting somebody's finger off. Like, no, that's called assault, shoving your phone in somebody's face and getting up into their personal space. That is not First Amendment. Okay. You are harassing somebody. That is also trespassing, obstructing federal operation and justice. Like, those are not protected by the First Amendment. Okay. And if I recall, and if you recall, I'm not that old, Barack Obama, he used his presidential powers to spy on journalists. James Rosen, Cheryl Atkinson. Okay. You guys can go look that up in your spare time. I'm not going to dig into that. Okay. But he weaponized his presidential powers against journalists. He also weaponized the IRS to block the Tea Party and pro-liberty groups from opposing him. He used the IRS to block them from obtaining 501c4 status so they could fundraise against him for the 2012 reelection his 2012 reelection. So he's not really one for civil liberties. Okay. He weaponized a state or a government agency against groups, pro-liberty groups, people who were assembling, wanted to form some sort of 501c4 status to fundraise and to try to get him out of there. So he blocked all of that. He weaponized a government agency against people. He also weaponized his presidential powers against journalists. And you guys can go read about that on your own time. I'm not going to dig into all of it right here, but I don't know what Barack Obama is talking about when he says core values. Okay. Because he's got no values, clearly. So he blathers on in this statement, and I'll just read another part of it. Federal law enforcement and immigration agents have a tough job, but Americans expect them to carry out their duties lawfully in an accountable way and to work with rather than against state and local officials to ensure public safety. That's not what we're seeing in Minnesota. In fact, we're seeing the opposite. Well, Barry, why don't you get with your buddy Tampon Timmy, and why don't you get with Jacob Frey? Maybe you guys can kind of speak in Muslim together. I don't know. I hear that Jacob Frey is fluent in Somalian. Maybe you and, somebody writes in the comment, he's a communist Islamist. Yeah, maybe Barack Obama speaks the same language as Jacob Frey. Why don't you guys all get together for coffee? And why don't you tell them that, hey, you ought to be working with President Trump, Secretary Kristi Noem, and other federal officials like Border Patrol Commander Greg Bavino. They have asked you, Tim, and Mayor Jacob Frey, on multiple occasions to allow DHS, ICE, Border Patrol agents to go into the jails, the prisons, and to find the criminally illegal. So on top of illegally entering the country, they're criminals. So they're doing drugs, murdering, raping, whatever. Why don't you allow DHS, ICE, Border Patrol to go into these prisons and local jails rather than have them go out into the public square and do targeted sweeps to try to find these people after you release them from custody. Keep them in jail, keep them in prison, alert the authorities that, hey, we have somebody here who also violated immigration law. They're yours now. You can carry out your deportation now. They continue to refuse, Walz and Frey, because they're our neighbors, the rapists, the murderers, the people who commit crimes on top of illegally entering the country, because I guess Walz and Frey sees those people as neighbors. Okay. And Walz and Frey, they continue to ramp up the protesters with their violence, with their insulting rhetoric about ICE agents and DHS and the presence in the state. Barry, why don't you tell them to quit that and to stop that? Maybe lecture those two about cooperation and working with federal law enforcement. Okay. How much more can they, like Trump has already said, we want to work with you. We don't want to fight against you. We want to work with you. Okay. So I don't understand how much more the federal side of this, I don't know how much more they can extend an olive branch to the local governments here and to state government. Like, what more do you want us to do? We have to carry out law. Are you going to tell us not to carry out deportation because that's what you want? And that's not what we're going to do. Okay. Because we have to enforce federal law. Obama knows this. Okay. And I want to be clear. Obama ordered extrajudicial and targeted killings of American citizens, including minors, during or via drone strikes. I think that he should sit this one out. Don't lecture anybody about morality or what they should be doing ethically or professionally, Barry. You're the guy who killed U.S. citizens, including children, minors, via drone strikes. So maybe sit this one out, my pal. Okay. Here's where Obama gets into the meat of his supposed takedown in this statement of his that he released on X. He launches insults not only against ICE, but against the Trump administration's handling of their surge. And he said that they are masked ICE recruits. Okay, so this is a talking point, obviously, of the left. Like, all of a sudden, this has become a talking point where they're not real ICE agents, but they're rather recruits that are Nazis and have been recruited via Nazi propaganda, which is really funny. And I'm starting to see this trend more and more. Somebody was in my comment section talking about this, so it's kind of funny because it's like, once the people start talking about, like, then the state officials start talking about, like, then it's a narrative, and you know that they're spinning a narrative because, like, everybody starts repeating the same talking points. And that's how I know it's not real. Okay. So he called them masked ICE recruits, and they're using this terminology, recruits. And then they're talking about how there's propaganda. So what they're referring to are the dope social media posts put out there by Pete Hegseth, like, for example, or ICE, Border Patrol. And what it really is, it's just like edits of ICE operations, and it's like exciting. They put some cool music behind it. Like, it's very American. I like, they're not saying, like, join the Nazi party, in these social media posts. They're just simply, like, replaying ICE operations conducted, and they're kind of dope. And, like, of course, it's going to get young men excited and amped up to go join, ICE or Border Patrol. So anyway, Barry, what he does here, he dismisses them, these ICE agents, either newly recruited or, some of these, most of them, I would say, have had years of training and service. And a majority of these officers have undergone years of training and service. I would say, I don't know how many, I'll have to look that number up, how many new ICE agents have come on since President Donald Trump has assumed office the second time around. I'd have to look that up. But Brock, you're just being petty here. So he turns up President Petty up to 11 here. Let me read this. This is part of the statement. Okay. For weeks now, people across the country have been rightly outraged by the spectacle of masked ICE recruits and other federal agents acting with impunity, engaging in tactics designed to intimidate, harass, provoke, and endanger the residents of a major American city. These unprecedented tactics, which even the former top lawyer of the DHS is in the first Trump administration has criticized as embarrassing, lawless, and cruel. So funny. We'll get to that. The DHS, like, of course, Trump, the first administration, they were all suckers. Okay, so the DHS secretary under the first Trump 1.0, of course, he's going to be bitter because he didn't choose him the second go around. He chose Kristi Noem, right? So he's disgruntled. Obviously, a lot of people in the first Trump administration are disgruntled. Anyway, he goes on. He goes, these tactics have now resulted in fatal shootings of 2 U.S. citizens. Yet rather than trying to impose some semblance of discipline and accountability over agents they've deployed, the president and the administration officials seem to eager to escalate the situation while offering public explanations for the shooting Mr. Pretti and Renee Good that aren't informed by a serious investigation. So they offer explanations without a serious investigation. Well, investigations take time, number one. Okay. Number two, they provide explanations prior to the investigation being concluded because it's in the best interest of the public to do so. They could just say no comment until the investigation is concluded, but that's not how the Trump administration works. Why? Because they typically operate in the utmost transparency. I've never seen a president that allows journalists to come in to the Oval and to just rapid fire questions at him. Like, okay, very transparent administration. So they offer some sort of explanation to the media, to the public, prior to the conclusion of the investigation. Whereas, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, a lot of the time, they just issue a no comment. Okay. So I think that it's nice that the Trump administration is going as far as to say, like, hey, here's our explanation. There was an ICE officer who believed that he was in imminent danger. Renee Good had a vehicle. She was asked to step out of the car. She didn't. She ran the vehicle. Like, they've provided explanations as to why these officers did what they did. And then they say that, hey, following the investigation, we're going to find out if it was truly justified or not. Okay, so he goes on in the statement and he says that the explanations appear to be directly contradicted by video evidence. What? The videos I'm watching, the explanations provided by DHS, provided by Kristi Noem in these press conferences, they all seem to line up with the video. Okay. And it's so funny that he questions the tactics here, and he points out that the former DHS secretary is critical of Trump and the tactics. It's funny because border czar Tom Homan has been used in these sweeps. He's directing these sweeps throughout multiple cities. Okay. Tom Homan is doing nothing different than what he did under Barack Obama's administration. Those are the same tactics that Barack Obama has used himself, obviously, because he appointed Tom Homan as the Executive Associate Director of Enforcement and Removal Operations for him. Okay, Tom Homan, President Barack Obama had Tom Homan. Tom Homan is the guy currently conducting these operations. He's doing the same exact thing that he's been doing, or that he did under President Barack Obama. Okay, he was even presented, Homan, the Presidential Rank Award from Obama in 2015. So I'm curious, Brock, what has changed? This is the same guy doing the same operations that he did for you under your presidency. What do you think has changed in terms of tactics? Wait, nothing has changed. Okay. The only thing that has changed is that you are no longer the deporter in chief. Trump is the deporter in chief. In fact, Trump doesn't even have the nickname deporter in chief. You got that nickname while you were president. And shall I point this out? 67 illegals died, illegal immigrants died while in ICE custody. That is nowhere near Trump's numbers at all. If any have died, I'd have to look into Trump's numbers, but I mean, this is bad. Nobody has had this, that amount of illegals die in ICE custody. Okay. Usually what Trump does, the Trump administration, they'll get them in custody and they deport them right away. What Obama was doing, he was getting them in custody and then waiting and sitting. And then they were more susceptible to dying. And I'll tell you how those 67 illegals died under his watch. And there was no protests on this. I want to be clear. Illegals were dying under Obama ICE custody, and there were no protests. Okay. The Obama administration did get into the crosshairs of ACLU at the time, and human rights groups. They said that there were subpar standards at these ICE facilities, that they were keeping these keeping these illegal immigrants in. These ICE facilities were below standards, and they built the cages, right? And they put the kids in the cages. Okay, oops. So during the Obama years, the migrant detention system was plagued with documented issues like medical care, substandard medical care, contributing to preventable deaths. Okay, so they would sit on these illegals and not actually deport them under the Obama administration. And this was all under the director of Barack Obama. Okay, and according to ACLU at the time, there were violations in medical standards, and the medical standards, those violations contributed to at least 8 of those 67 deaths between 2010 and 2012. Okay, so in 2 years, 8 people died because of the substandard medical practices that were offered to illegals while in custody at these ICE facilities. Okay, by mid 2016, the count had reached to 56 deaths under Barack Obama, including 6 suicides. Okay, so they were there long enough to have died by suicide. Okay, and 67 total deaths happened during Obama's full time in office, according to ICE records. Critics say that even though Barack Obama's administration oversaw some of the highest death rates of migrants in custody, no major riots erupted, no protests. There was no coordinated efforts to go against ICE and their operations. There was no coordinated effort to take out ICE agents or to chase them out of these cities where they were conducting mass operations. I forget the number. It's way more deportations carried out under Obama's first year in office than Trump's first year in office, which is a criticism I have of President Donald Trump. At the rate we're going, we are not going to deport the 20 million illegals that flooded over Biden's open border. And that is something that he promised us, the mass deportations, and they're not big enough. Okay, Obama had bigger ones. Okay, so that's a criticism I have of President Donald Trump. Meanwhile, coordinated anti-ICE protests are happening right now, and they have turned into riots. They have erupted across the nation, and it's getting really bad in Minnesota. You know, I don't know about you, but like these protesters in Minnesota, it's freezing in Minnesota right now, I'm sure. Like, don't you have, like, I don't know, cookies to bake? Renee Good, why aren't you making meals for your son? Alex Pretti, like, don't you love nature? Like, why aren't you doing that? Like, instead of risking your life. Clearly, you hate your life that much to where you're going to go out and, like, get yourself killed. I don't know. It's bizarre. Much of these protesters are paid. This is really starting to come out now. George Soros, through his various organization, Neville Roy Singham, who's a billionaire tied to the CCP, and he is currently living in China right now. So if you follow the money, you'll see that a lot of these NGOs receive funding through these billionaires, these foreign billionaires. Okay, so this is not only a domestic attack, an open rebellion of the United States, Tim Walz, but this is funded by our adversaries. So this is a takedown of the United States, or an attempt to take down the federal government by our foreign adversaries and by people who hate the U.S., George Soros being one of them. Okay, so that's what's happening here. And it shouldn't shock you, because people like Tim Walz and Governor J.B. Pritzker, they're in the pockets of CCP. Okay, look at Governor J.B. Pritzker. I've talked about this before. The millions in tax breaks to Goshen, which is a CCP company, a company with ties to CCP. They make electric vehicle batteries. They're now shifting to make data center batteries. We know that that's really compromising to our national security, having those types of companies reside here in the state of Illinois, because they could be producing malware or surveillance technology in electric vehicles and or data centers, and collecting information. So, right. These ICE tactics didn't result in the shooting deaths of Renee Good and Alex Pretti. Okay. They both, the fact that both Good and Pretti went out of their way to harass, intimidate, and disrupt lawful immigration operations has become increasingly evident as to the reason why they died. Okay, these are incidences being investigated, but it's become, even with Pretti at this point, it's becoming obvious that they died because they went out of their way to harass, intimidate, and disrupt lawful immigration operations. And perhaps were paid to do so. We don't know for sure, but it's being investigated. Obama here, what he's doing with this statement, he's gaslighting you. He's trying to get you to see something different that I see in the video evidence. And he's claiming that DHS, Border Patrol, their defenses here of their officers have been contradicted by that video evidence, and that is a load of horse crap. Okay, the reason the left lost Renee Good is because she stalked ICE agents for hours. Her and her girlfriend or wife or whatever lesbian thing. She stalked them for hours. They were trying to shovel their car out of the snow, and they were harassing agents while they were trying to shovel their car out of the snow. Her and her group of agitators. And she was about to be arrested. She was told to exit the vehicle. She refused to exit. And then she proceeded to ram her car into an ICE officer who later suffered internal injuries, internal bleeding, and caused injury to that officer. Alex Pretti. Let's get to him. ICU nurse, And like I said, a nurse does not elevate you to some level of moral superiority. And it's kind of gross that nurses everywhere think that they are better than everybody because of what they do. In fact, I would argue that because of what you do, you are more disrespected in society now in 2026 than you have ever been because of COVID and the way nurses conducted themselves during the pandemic. They were complacent and complicit in medical malpractice. Okay, so he's not morally superior because he's a nurse and because he likes nature. Okay, just to be clear, now is he a human being? Yes, and does he deserve to live? Of course, every human being deserves to live, right to life. Okay, but he forfeited that right in putting himself in a risky situation. Win stupid prizes when you play stupid games. Okay, So, I love this self-defense expert. He's one of my favorites. I watch him all the time. Watch his Sonia Massey breakdown, the pot of boiling water. That is a perfect example of somebody who did not conduct themselves, I would argue, ethically or professionally, but was justified in that shooting. And at least I thought, the courts, it became political, and the court of public opinion convicted that guy rather than the law, who, took out Sonia Massey. But this is a self-defense expert. Love him. He's one of the top experts in the country, I think, when it comes to self-defense law. He weighs in here. Now, the firearm matters. The media is hiding this, that there was a firearm there. There was a firearm. Now, this is like a SIG something, and forgive me, I'm not like super huge on guns. I like shooting them. You know what I mean? Like, I don't really get into like the types. The bigger, the better. The bigger the blast, the better. I'm like a 12 gauge shotgun kind of gal. I like when my arm like flies out of my socket, like, that's how I judge firearms. How big is the boom, right? I would probably like a cannon. If I could conceal carry a cannon, I would. So the firearm does matter here because apparently this one has some issues. In gun circles, people have said like this is known to kind of like go off. Now, when I watch the video, I hear a pop, and then a few seconds later, pop, 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 pop. Okay, so I don't know if he fired it, like actually grabbed the gun and fired it. It looks like he might have been reaching for the gun in the video. That's possible, and it's possible he didn't. But it doesn't matter either way. If he grabbed the gun, if his gun went off in his harness or in his holster, if the gun dropped out of his holster and it went off, it doesn't really matter. It matters that he was armed and that he participated in harassment, obstruction of operations, and he was resisting arrest. That's what matters in this. Okay. So the Minneapolis Border Patrol shooting, the suspect was armed with a Sig Sauer P30 or P320. This is a high capacity. He had 2 magazines, which I don't want to get into all of this. I just want to tell you the facts so that way you know. This was a pretty serious concealed carry. Okay, like $2,000 he spent on this gun. Okay, and this gun is known to kind of have some issues. Okay, in gun circles. This whole setup, he had like a magazine, he had like a Sig Romeo optic, which like has a laser on it. So not a cheap carry gun. Okay, so I bring this up only to say we know that this gun has issues, and I just want to be clear, like what he was carrying. And he was carrying this gun in a holster and it was concealed. Okay, those are the facts. Officers got into a physical struggle with him. He shoved his phone in their faces. They were conducting an operation to apprehend an illegal immigrant from Ecuador, and he started to obstruct that operation, Alex Pretti. And they struggled with this guy after attempting to arrest him for probably harassment and obstruction. I don't know, because he died. So they're not officially charging him. So we don't know what he would have been charged with. But they were attempting to arrest him, and this ultimately wound up in a struggle. He was resisting arrest. So the suspect was seen to be armed by several Border Patrol agents who saw that he had a gun on his person. Okay. Now this was concealed. He got into a physical altercation with the ICE agents, but ultimately the gun was perceived. Okay. And the word gun was shouted. And under self-defense law, officers are entitled to rely on fellow officers' reasonable perceptions. Okay, so one officer behind him might have shouted gun, because like he might have been able, and I don't know if it's very hard to tell if he grabbed the gun. There is a video or a picture, a still shot or a frame. I could pull it up for you where there is something in his hand that is not a cell phone. I don't know if it was a knife. It looks more like a knife to me than a gun, but he did have a gun, and it was perceived that he had a gun by one of the officers. Now, one of the officers shouts the word gun. Now, at that point, all the officers around him, his fellow officers, they have a reasonable perception, this is legal terminology, that they were in imminent danger because a gun is a deadly weapon, and they were reasonably perceiving that they were in imminent danger of death. Okay, or imminent danger of a deadly weapon. Okay, and because they were your fellow officer, like these fellow officers, they don't even have to personally confirm that there was a gun. I want to be clear about that, because your fellow officers saying the word gun gives you a reasonable perception that there is a threat. Okay, and they don't have to personally confirm that. Once the firearm appears during active resistance, okay, you get into a traffic stop and you have a gun on your person and you engage the officer during the traffic stop, and then he feels the gun on you in the struggle. Okay, you get into some sort of altercation with this officer. He feels the gun on you and you are resisting. The legal standard is simple. Okay, reasonable perception of imminent deadly force. Okay, that is the standard that was met here, which can be met with deadly force and is justified deadly force. Okay, so you're going to get a lot of people who are freeze framing this, but it doesn't matter if he shot the gun. It doesn't matter if he pulled the gun. It doesn't matter if he pulled the knife. It doesn't matter. He was resisting arrest, actively resisting, and there was a firearm that appeared in that resistance, in that active resistance, which leads officers to reasonably, their perception doesn't even have to be right. If it was a stick that looked like a gun, okay, or if it was a BB gun, or a bubble gun, or a water gun, okay, it just has to be a reasonable perception of imminent deadly force in order for a shooting to be justified. Tragic, but lawful use of force. Take a listen.
There's been lots of lawsuits where people say, I bumped the gun in the holster and it just went off and shot me in the leg, that kind of stuff. In this case, it's beginning to look, at least initially, as if one of the ICE guys perceived the gun on the suspect, this gun, and took it off his person and was turning away, walking away with the gun to secure it from the suspect. But what might have happened, remember, there's a whole bunch of officers involved. They're not all, Ethernet cable to each other's brains. They're all seeing different things. And one officer might have seen the gun and said the word gun. And that might have triggered that first shot by an officer. And then all the other officers begin shooting in response to that initial discharge. That does not make the shooting unlawful. It would be an awful but lawful shooting. So what's required for the shooting to be lawful? The officers have to have a reasonable perception of an imminent threat of unlawful deadly force harm. That's it. If the answer to that is yes, this is a lawful shoot. They're struggling with this gun. If they perceive this guy as being non-compliant with arrest, fighting with officers, as reaching for a weapon, they will have reasonably perceived an imminent threat of unlawful deadly force harm, justifying their use of deadly defensive force. And their perception does not have to be correct. Their perception has to be reasonable. We're not required to make perfect decisions in self-defense. Police, too. We're required to make reasonable decisions in self-defense. If an officer heard a fellow officer shout gun, and officers are allowed to rely on the expertise of training on their fellow officers, they don't personally need to see the threat themselves. If another officer with whom they're working in that event shouts out that the triggering event has been observed by a fellow officer, that's enough for another officer to resort to the use of deadly defensive force. They're allowed to rely on their reasonable perceptions of the other officer's communications and conduct. Happens all the time, because everyone knows the officers have different perspectives or seeing different things at any given time. Every officer does not personally need to see the threat. He has to have a reasonable belief that the threat is present. That can be based on a reliance of what other officers communicate to him. So if one officer shouts gun, all the other officers are going to be prepared to, and some of them will shoot, as appears to be what happened here.
Okay. So that kind of addresses this. I am so pro Second Amendment. It's not even funny. But this isn't a Second Amendment issue. Okay. He forfeited the Second Amendment right when he resisted arrest and obstructed an operation. Much like First Amendment no longer is the First Amendment once you start throwing punches at people. Okay. Once you start harassing somebody while armed, you are inviting the risk of defensive force. Okay. So they pushed him to the ground. I don't know how accurate this is that they disarmed him before they fired, but even so, say they disarmed him, say an officer managed to get the gun out of his holster, grabbed the gun, and some people say that the gun went off and that the slide slid back, and the SIG, which is known to have some issues with going off, when bumped. Okay. But say they did disarm him. Okay. The word gun was already shouted. Okay. One officer might have been able to get the gun off of his person, but and disarm him. But once that word gun was shouted, there was a reasonably perceived imminent deadly danger, okay, to these officers. And that justified automatically him having a gun combined with his resistance to arrest and fighting with ICE agents and anything that led up to this incident before. The obstruction of the operation, the resisting arrest, the harassment, all of that before tied into this. And they now have reasonable perception that he was going to commit an act of deadly force against them, which justifies defensive deadly force. Okay. So even if they disarmed him, one officer might have been able to disarm him. The word gun was shouted. That's a justified shooting. Okay. So it doesn't really matter if he was disarmed. Because in the heat of the moment, was there reasonable perception of deadly harm or deadly force? Yes. And, Barack Obama, he can throw out all of these half-truths that, ICE is taking down U.S. citizens who are innocent, peaceful protesters, which just isn't true in this case or in the Renee Good case. They were both armed with deadly weapons. And, Obama, he's spoken half-truths during his presidency. Remember when he said, oh, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. It's kind of his brand, half-truthing things. Okay. And what has to stop is this approach from Tim Walz, Mayor Frey, where they are inciting citizens to go out there and fight federal officers. Okay. The incitement has to stop. And look, it's very clear that hang on, let me look this. These aren't peaceful protests. I want to be clear. So Obama, in his statement, he called these peaceful protests. Somebody lost a finger. Okay. Their finger got bit off, an ICE agent. Okay. We're beyond the point of peaceful. Okay. Now, I don't know what they're referring to, what Barack is referring to when he says peaceful, because it's just not true. These are not peaceful protests. Perhaps he's referring to January 20th, there were some protests. It was called Free America Walkouts in protest of ICE and the 1-year anniversary of President Donald Trump's second term inauguration. Okay. News reports indicate that there were a few thousand people scattered, throughout blue cities that were participating in this. Those were peaceful protests. Okay. And maybe he's referring to that. More people probably attended Charlie Kirk's memorial service than those who attended those peaceful protests, those ridiculous peaceful protests, the Free America walkouts. But we're not talking about those. Okay. I want to be clear. We're talking about the Renee Goods and the Alex Prettis who are going out and disrupting federal law enforcement from conducting lawful operations. So Obama ended his statement here with a little diatribe, and he said, they are a timely reminder that ultimately it's up to us as citizens to speak out against injustice, protect our basic freedoms, and hold government accountable. Under the Barack Obama administration, nobody's rights were respected. He weaponized his presidential powers against journalists. He weaponized the IRS against the Tea Party. So his little statement here is very empty. It's about as empty as his suit. So smash that like button, share this out with your friend. We need more details to make an educated opinion. From what I've seen, it seems like there was confusion and chaos. My big question is, why did he resist arrest? Yeah, I mean, I think that we definitely need more details. It was, of course, it's chaotic because it's a struggle between the officers and Alex Pretti. Okay. Of course, it's going to look chaotic. Of course, it's going to be, not like a trained Navy SEAL taking down an enemy. Okay. And it's not going to be precise because this is a real life moment that these officers are going through. It's just, what does the self-defense law say? Did the officers, this is the question you got to ask yourself, did the officers have a reasonable perception of imminent deadly force? And if they did, then, and I think that just the fact that the guy shouting gun, one of these ICE officers or one of these Border Patrol agents shouting the word gun, that gives everybody reasonable perception that there's going to be deadly force. And that is a justified shooting. And it's not just that he was carrying the gun, it's the resistance and the struggle and the fighting and not putting his hands up and putting them behind his back. I'd love to see the body cam footage. I'm sure that they're wearing it, and we'll get that eventually, where they ask him like, hey, put your hands up, or, we're arresting you now, or telling him get down on the ground. He was not compliant, obviously, with officer demands. So yeah, I think that we're going to find out a lot. But the resistance, that is what leads these officers to believe that he's going to be a danger. And then he's a danger with deadly force when the gun's revealed. So it's not a Second Amendment issue. And that really pisses me off, because it's like, you and I, we carry, right? We conceal carry. And when you're a responsible gun owner, you understand, and I've talked about this before because I've interviewed gun violence victims. It's just violence used with a gun, violence used with any weapon. When somebody does not have a weapon of similar force behind it is a different kind of violence. Okay, so say somebody wields a baseball bat against you and you're not armed. That is a particularly demonic form of violence. Okay. And when you are engaging, obstructing, harassing, or conducting yourself in an aggressive way and wielding a weapon, that is inviting risk. Okay. Because you have to assume that the other person is a victim. Okay. In this case, the Border Patrol agents, victims. Okay. When he started to engage them. Okay. Now, these victims happened to have weapons of a similar force. So when you engage, when you have that force behind you and you victimize somebody, like, you have to be prepared for that victim to fight back. Okay. And, it's clear that these Border Patrol agents were armed. A responsible gun owner would have understood that, hey, if I engage these people while armed, like that, this victim or this person that I am engaging with has the ability to fight back and is armed equally. Right? So, like, you have to assess those situations as a responsible gun owner. And it really just pisses me off because, like, they're taking the Second Amendment and they're saying that he had Second Amendment rights. Yes, but like, those rights come with discernment and responsible gun ownership and risk. Okay. Just like the First Amendment has risks. Me doing this show has risk. People hate me. I mean, like, calling out local officials or state officials, like, that opens up risk to my life. And I understand that. It's a God-given right that I have, but I have to understand the power of it. And this guy obviously didn't. So, all right. He was wielding a phone? What? Dude, I don't know where you're getting your information from, but he definitely had a SIG on him. I have no opinion. You obviously have no opinion other than to defend the agents. The failure to even have an open conversation of both sides shows your ignorance. No, I'm not saying that the ICE agents are not completely absolved of all punishment here. I think that they conducted themselves maybe unprofessionally, unethically. A lot of these ICE agents, I think, are being unethical. For example, even like the Sonia Massey case in Illinois, where she wielded a pot of boiling water against the guy. He was cussing at her. He was not de-escalating the situation. But that's a totally different conversation. Ethical, professional, how they're conducting themselves when asking. Like, he was ripping the car door open to get to Renee Good, the ICE agent in that case, and he was trying to rip open the car door. Trying to conduct yourself in a more professional or ethical manner might have been more appropriate in that situation. But you have to understand, it was hours of Renee Good stalking these ICE agents, throwing things at them while they were trying to get their car out of the snow. She was with a group that was throwing things at them while they were conducting an operation. And it leads to frustration because we're all human. Okay, so he was ripping the car door open and saying, "Get out of the vehicle." Now, you could argue that, hey, that's unprofessional, or hey, it's unethical. The language a lot of these ICE agents use, F this, F that. But, like, that's a conversation to have with the superiors who hire these people, and what they want the temperature to be as an agency as a whole. You could definitely argue that, hey, was it ethical? Was it unprofessional? Did they politely ask him to, or not even politely, did they make it clear, hey, we're arresting you? These are all kind of ethical, professional lines. And that is not a conversation we're having today. The conversation we're having today is this a lawfully justified shooting? And I think that the law points clearly to the fact that it was lawful and justified. So, I mean, it depends on, the Border Patrol agency, what they want their culture to be. And perhaps we've reached a point in this country where we can no longer be ethical or professional, our law enforcement officers, because there is such a hatred towards law enforcement, and you can no longer work with these people. Okay. And it's gotten to a point where the temperature's so high where, officers are done playing cutesy time and done trying to de-escalate situations because they've lost their lives trying to de-escalate. So, yeah, I mean, I'd be okay with having a conversation about ethical and professionalism. But I think officers have been pushed to a point where they're no longer as ethical as they used to be or as professional as they used to be, because they've been pushed in that direction and they've become frustrated because the left is so anti-law enforcement. But we can have a conversation about that. Anyway, yeah, subbed in, like, thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, I'd be open with it. Even, legally, if he didn't have a gun, but like, it's very clear that he did. He had a holster on him, and like, I don't even think people are refuting that he had a gun. Most people are saying, like, yes, he was definitely wielding a weapon, not a cell phone. And that doesn't inherently justify the shooting, that he was holding a gun. It was the fact that he was resisting arrest and obstructing an operation. They were trying to obtain an illegal from Ecuador, and then he was resisting arrest from these Border Patrol agents. And I don't think people understand that Border Patrol agents and ICE, they can arrest you for things like trespassing, vandalizing, obstructing, resisting arrest. They can arrest you for those things on top of going after illegal immigrants for violating federal law, the federal immigration law that says that you've got to be a citizen or have some sort of citizenship status, temporary status, whatever that is. So they're law enforcement, and not complying when they ask you to get down on your knees or put your hands up, or they say you're under arrest, not complying with that is the same as if you were to say that to an officer who, stops you in traffic. Like, you're opening yourself up to extreme risk when you resist a lawful demand here of arrest. We have a process, and people need to trust in this process in order for it to work. Once you're arrested, you can argue that you shouldn't have been. That's what the judicial system is all about. Okay. But that moment when an officer arrests you, we have to put faith in the system that, hey, I'm going to comply with this arrest, and then I'm going to go fight my way out of it in court. Okay. But here's why they resist arrest, because they know once they're arrested, they're screwed because they were breaking the law. Okay. Most people who resist arrest, if they weren't doing anything wrong, right, they wouldn't resist arrest, and they would understand that, oh, this cop is being out of control. There's a system set up to protect me, and where I can go fight, and I have due process. So you can fight your way. Can't fight your way out of court when you're murdered. That's the thing here. He wasn't going to get murdered until he started to struggle. And it required 4 agents to bring him down and subdue him. Okay. Like, clearly he was struggling. Like, I don't think anybody's arguing that this guy didn't struggle in this. Okay. So he easily could have gotten down on his knees, put your hands behind your head, right? Or, okay, officer, let me turn around, put my hands behind my back, right? Whatever they had instructed him to do. I'm sure we'll get it on the body cam. Like, but saying no and then shoving your phone in his face when he's asking you to get down on the knees or put your hands behind your head or back, and shoving your phone in his face and shoving him, that is going to warrant a takedown. You are considered resisting arrest, and that allows the officer to take you down in some sort of forceful way because you are resisting, and they treat you as a hostile suspect. Okay. So, he was pushed down by the officer after he shoved his phone in his face, and he was asked, "Hey, we're arresting you. Put your hands up. Get down on the ground." He didn't do that. He engaged the officers further, right? And then that warrants a takedown, a push down by officers. They were suffocating him with mace. And didn't you watch the footage, the video footage? Okay, I don't know if mace was used or not. I haven't seen mace. I didn't see mace being used. I don't know. We're watching the same video footage. I know we are. If mace was used, that is especially if the word gun was shouted, okay, it warrants not only the officers the ability to use pepper spray or mace, but it also allows the officers to meet that deadly force defensively with deadly force via a gun. Okay, so I'm not shocked that they were using pepper spray. I'm not shocked that they used guns to take him down. Why? Because he was resisting arrest and also wielding a deadly weapon, or had a deadly weapon on him. So that causes officers to have a reasonable perception of deadly force, which can be met with defensive deadly force. Like, this is the law. Okay. Put his phone in his face. You just said it was a gun. What? No. So in the beginning, prior to the takedown, prior to him getting shoved down to the ground, what was Alex Pretti doing? Alex Pretti was instructed by officers, Border Patrol agents, that he was being arrested. Okay, we know that he had obstructed an operation where they were trying to apprehend an illegal from Ecuador. Okay, but he had gotten to the way of this operation, and he started filming the ICE agents and had his phone like this and shoved it in the face of the officer while they were conducting an operation. We're going to arrest you now. Hands up, hands behind your back. Get down. We'll have to see the body cam footage. But it's clear that they said they were talking to him. Okay. Alex Pretti. And he was not compliant. Once he showed non-compliance, the officers, multiple of them, brought him down to the ground and treated him as a hostile suspect, or as a hostile person whom they were arresting. Okay, so yeah, I don't get it. Like, his phone in their face, obstructing, resisting arrest, not complying with the officer's demands, led him to the ground, pushed him down to the ground, maced him because he was being treated as hostile because he was resisting. Maced him maybe after the officer shouted out the word gun. You can hear that in the tape, which would have warranted more force, and in fact, even warranted deadly force, which ultimately happened. So, yeah. She said he had a knife. I said, okay, there's a freeze frame floating around there. Hang on. I think I could probably find it. That is very clear that he has something in his hand that does not look like a cell phone. And to me, it kind of looked like a knife possibly, but he did have a holster and he did have the SIG. Okay. So Whether he took the SIG out, that would have really warranted a reasonable perception of imminent deadly force from the officer's perspective. I saw him reach for something, and then he had something in his hand, and it did not appear to be a cell phone. It could have been a gun, it could have been a knife. There's a still frame out there. Yeah, so smash that like button, share this out with your friends, subscribe to the channel. Appreciate you being here. I gotta go for the day. 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. Central Time. We'll be back tomorrow with the Conservative Cat Show, and we will get into some Illinois things. It shouldn't shock you that Illinois is doing dumb things, such as suggesting we should have rent control in the state or via local referendums. This is a stupid bill. Sounds so compassionate. We're going to put rent caps on everybody and we're going to control rent. Sounds compassionate. And then you think about it for more than 5 seconds and you're like, oh, wait, no, that's actually really bad. It's going to lead to government controlled housing totally, because everybody's going to leave. The developers are not going to develop anymore. The renters or the landlords are not going to stay in a state where they can't make money. So they're going to leave. And then this government solution would be, of course, government housing only. So smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you tomorrow. Love you so much. Bye-bye.